Michael, good morning. This is Chris Maher. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How you doing, Chris?
Good. This is our Friday morning series on legal subjects that very often arise out of questions posed to us by viewers. And this morning, we are going to discuss some of the repercussions or implications, if you will, of what happens to your immigration status if you are not a citizen of this country. Um, if you are found guilty in a court or before some administrative uh, tribunal or administrative body, um, such as the Department of Motor Vehicles, and what does it do to your immigration status? I know from personal experience that if you are not a citizen of the United States and if you are charged with uh, crimes, very often, if you are pleading guilty to something or are found guilty by a jury or a judge after a trial on some charge, typically a criminal charge, that it can have profound, frightening, if you will, implications for your immigration status, regardless of whether you are completely illegal or whether you are on some type of a path to citizenship, like a green card. Um, and I've had many instances where uh, people have called me up and have explained to me that they were not made aware of this, uh, because very often you'll find that if you order the transcripts from the court proceedings, and that's something that I recommend to people all the time, you should contact the court or, let's say, the Department of Motor Vehicles and order the actual trial or hearing transcript. It's going to cost you money to do it, but um, especially if it's a live court reporter who was present in a courtroom, who will charge you for that transcript. But it's very important to see and be able to read what was said to you during any trial or plea proceedings where you were either pleading guilty to something or were found guilty of something after a trial. And so it's important that you get involved in that process as soon after the adverse result as you can. Very often, a client will wait some period of time, and if you wait, you will have waived certain rights just by waiting and not doing anything. So it's important to get promptly involved in defending yourself and continuing to defend yourself uh, after you think the court proceedings are over. And if nothing else, as I say all the time, and we say all the time, um, it doesn't cost someone money to call up lawyers who I'm familiar with, who will give free advice over the phone to somebody. And very often, that advice is based on many years of experience. I've been doing this for 35 years. So there's not too many proceedings that I'm not familiar with. Um, and uh, it costs you nothing to make that call and to get some advice. And the advice very often is advice that's a lot more than call a lawyer and hire a lawyer. It's do some things on your own that may save you time, may save you money, and may help whoever the lawyer is that you may get involved in the proceeding to better give you an opinion about what to do. So, Michael, I'm not a lawyer who practices immigration law, but you are. And so I'm going to turn it over to you with respect to that same subject as it applies in immigration situations.
Thanks, Chris. Ironically enough, it's all a lot of it is all pretty much the same kind of principles in that in the event that you either plead guilty or are found guilty by a jury or even by a judge, what's going to happen is that at your sentencing hearing, the judge should basically tell you that your guilty plea or your finding will have a profound effect on your immigration status, regardless of where you are in the process. So, for instance, if what we see a lot of is sometime in like the early or late 90s when somebody was in high school. They made a few mistakes. They maybe got a DWI, and they just couldn't afford to do much. So they just signed away, said, okay, I'll take a class, do whatever. And the lawyer said, yep, this is the best thing you can possibly do. Here it is. But what doesn't happen is, and what that person doesn't realize is 20 years later, they are going to be denied their ability to become a citizen, and can possibly face deportation matters because they're not a legal citizen because they pled guilty. And so one of the things that should happen, and which is why you really want to get the transcripts, is that the judge should make clear to you that um, part of the sentencing hearing is the judge should make clear to you that you understand that in the event that you are found guilty or that you plead guilty, that it will have an effect and could basically result in you not being admitted to the United States citizenship. And so what the problem, like what we were talking about, is you do that in the 90s, you don't remember who it is. It was probably a public defender. And not to say one way or another about their practice, but more times than not, we see is that they don't have a lot of time to work with a client individually, and perhaps there's a language barrier. And so at the time, there's a miscommunication between what actually the client understands as to what they're agreeing to. And everyone does stupid things as teenagers, and you don't realize that profound effect that could have 20, 30 years later when you're trying to become a citizen. And so one of the things that the Supreme Court has actually ruled is that if an attorney fails to warn you of that a guilty plea could have an effect on your immigration status, if they fail to do that, that could be considered of ineffective assistance of counsel. And more times than not, that's really the only way you can kind of disprove, excuse me, you can reopen that case 20, 30 years later to say, Your Honor, I never would have pled guilty but for the fact that my lawyer told me to and never explained what would happen. And those are really, really hard cases to prove. And it's obviously there's nothing we can do about what happened in the past or what happened 20, 30 years ago. And so, but now, there's, for anyone who's facing any type of criminal proceeding, ranging from anything from small DWI to felony murder, it's anything that any criminal proceeding and any adjudication of that, guilty plea, found guilty, going to court, all of this, your immigration status, if you're not a U.S. citizen, it will have a profound effect about what will happen. And so, which is why, whenever you are in the middle of criminal proceedings and you may or may not be a legal immigrant, you really need to make sure that you understand and your lawyer understands, more importantly too, about the fact that you are not a legal citizen and that you have possible concerns about what this could have on your immigration status. And just like you were saying before, that it costs nothing to make a phone call to a criminal attorney, costs nothing to make a phone call to an immigration attorney to say, before you accept that guilty plea, to say, hey, my attorney said this, this, and this, and this. He got me a great deal. All I got to pay is like $20, but I'm worried because I eventually want to take a immigration status or citizenship test. Should I agree to this or should I roll the dice? And that's there's a lot of factors there in play, and so it's just something that we really make sure that it's important that our clients know, or any person knows who's not currently a legal citizen, is that literally any type of criminal proceeding that you're in, it doesn't matter if it's like a littering or, like I said, a felony murder, it can have a profound effect about what happens to your immigration status 20, 30 years later. And so before you plead guilty, or if don't ever act as your own attorney, but if you do and you think you got yourself a great deal, make sure that you talk to an immigration attorney first before you agree to that, so you don't end up in a situation where there's unfortunately little or not a lot you can do 20 years later. And so just exactly what you just said, Chris, pick up that phone, make a phone call. Costs nothing to make that call, especially to us. We'll talk to you, even if you have another criminal attorney handling it. We'll talk to you about the immigration, possible implications regarding that. But never just plead guilty just because you think it's a good deal, because there are a lot of consequences in a lot of different various ways, which you may never know of.
Thank you, Michael.
You're
If
welcome.
if anybody has any questions, obviously, like we say all the time, call your local attorney who has experience in these matters, or you're welcome to call our offices at any hour of the day or night, 7 days a week. So there's a number at the bottom of the screen. You're welcome to call that phone number 24 hours a day. Thank you so much, Michael, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Take care, Chris.